Hi, everybody. This is Mike Heumann from G2M Research, and thank you for joining our webinar today. The title is Bug Bounties Gone Bad. Let's go ahead and jump into it. So a couple of quick ground rules or information. So we will be recording this webinar, and we'll send a link of the recording to everybody who registered for the webinar. We'll also send a PDF of this final slide set to everybody as well. That usually happens about 2 days after the webinar or so. So maybe Friday if Zoom goes quickly, worst case on Monday, but you'll all get a copy of the recording. You're strongly urged to ask questions and encouraged to do so. Zoom has a Q&A feature. Please use that to put in your questions. We have a Q&A session at the end of the session, and we'll go through at that point and answer all the questions. Finally, we're going to have 3 surveys of the audience during the webinar. Again, we'll use Zoom's survey tool to do these. All your answers are anonymous. I won't know what you answered. None of the panelists will know what you answered. So don't feel intimidated by doing that, because you may put an answer that your boss or somebody else doesn't like. So if you could be a part of those, that'd be really great. So again, the webinar should go for roughly an hour. We just did the kickoff. Next, Karen Heumann, our Chief Security Analyst, will go through the highlights of the Uber case. Then we'll introduce each of our 3 panelists. After that, we'll have 3 panel questions, followed by the audience Q&A, and then we'll go into wrap-up. And with that, let me introduce our panelists. So with us is Matt Johnson. Matt Johnson's a Principal Security Architect at IBM. We also have Garrett Grajek. Garrett is CEO of UAttest, an identity company. And then finally, Tony Anscombe, who's the Chief Security Analyst at ESET, as well as Karen Heumann, who I said earlier was our Principal Cybersecurity Analyst. And with that, Karen, let me turn it over to you.
Yeah, so you can see on the slide, we have some of the facts about the Uber case. You know, CISOs are expected to protect the company and all the associated assets of that company against cyber threats. And that protection ranges from securing the company infrastructure and preventing business disruption to preventing disclosure of customers' personal information, such as social security numbers. In the case of Uber had experienced a breach. They were being investigated regarding that breach. And in the middle of the investigation, they were breached again. The hackers demanded ransom, and the CISO, Joe Sullivan, consulted with his coworkers, including legal counsel, and used bug bounty money, which was capped at $10,000, to pay a $100,000 ransom. He even had the hackers sign an NDA. The CEO at the time signed off on everything, but when the new CEO came in and learned what had happened, he reported the breach and worked with the government to convict Sullivan. And why that is important today is, and you can go to the next slide, is ransomware attacks are on the rise. We've seen from 2017, there were 184 million reported breaches compared to 623 million attacks in 2021. And companies don't have a process for employees and vendors to report these breaches. Jurisdictions require reporting, and there are penalties for not reporting in a timely fashion. And bug bounty programs don't really get you off the hook is kind of the bottom line that we're learning.
Thanks, Karen. With that, let me introduce Matt. Matt is, as I said earlier, is a Principal Security Analyst with IBM. I've known Matt for quite a while, and Matt, take it away.
So Matt Johnson, Principal Security Architect, 15 years in the business, essentially on the security side, a little longer than that on the IT side. But my background is primarily building out large security operations centers and CSIRT teams for federal, mainly military, state, and local government, as well as large-scale commercial entities. Are
you there, Matt?
I think it's that Denver internet.
No problem. Why don't we go on to Garrett, and if Matt can get back, we can go through a slide. So Garrett.
Greetings, Garrett Grajek, identity guy. Literally last 30 years, that's what I've been up to. wonderful enterprises such as IBM, RSA, and those who can date themselves, Integrity, which was the first SSO product in the world. I've then gone on to create my own two-factor and SSO companies. If you ever heard of SecureAuth, that was my invention. Now focused on identity attestation. Next. So what's going on is people don't always know what's actually in their enterprises. Yeah, they do if they have a huge operation, but most don't. Next. So what I have perfected at UAttest is the concept of user access reviews. Those in the audit world, that's basically what you do in the SOX season in HIPAA HITRUST. You're supposed to attest to all the roles in your enterprises. 99% of you out there do it through manual, through emails and spreadsheets. I got a solution to help you not do that. Next. So what we do is we take what you got. You got an IAM. The IAMs are great today. I invented the IAM, so I'm really impressed with the products out there today. Let's use what you got. Next. Then I connect into those wonderful IAM products. Next. I take in any data that you have siloed, which is very often financial health costs, and then you, the risk manager, run the report. I get this stuff running in 3 minutes, not kidding. Then you run out reports and rock and roll. You now have a full, next, you have a full report that you submit as evidence to your SOC, to your SOC 2, to your HIPAA, to your HITRUST, to your CMMC that says, these are the users and they are all tested. All right, that's what we do now. Oh, and it's, I take your manual process and crush it. Just crush it. Okay, all the best. Thanks.
Thanks, Garrett. And let's go to Tony. Tony's Chief Security Analyst at ESET.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure how to follow Garrett's great introduction there, but anyway, hi, I'm Tony Anscombe, Chief Security Evangelist at ESET. I've been in the industry, it says on this screen, about 20 years, the security industry about 20 years, but prior to that in the IT industry. I spend a lot of my time talking on webinars like this, but I also look after ESET's relationships with technology companies such as Microsoft and Google and people like that from a technology perspective. Very important for cybersecurity companies to be integrated into platforms and OS environments, as I think we all know. Next. So to give you a bit of background about ESET, we are, many of you might know us from an AV perspective, but we've been in the cybersecurity business about 30 years. We're based in Slovakia, so we're an EU-based company, but we're obviously now an international company with a lot of offices around the world. We protect around 1 billion internet users. Some of you, if you're running on a Windows machine and you have Google Chrome, there's some internet ESET technology built into Google Chrome. If you run an Android phone, we're part of the ADA Alliance for Google, where we scan apps before they're listed. So you can see that our technology is used in a lot of fairly big situations. We are an AV company. That's what most people associate our brand with. However, we have products all the way up through to EDR, XDR, MDR, very heavy on the MSP and cloud protection. So worth coming to take a look and check us out. Next. Next.
Let's see if that works. There we go.
Aha, there you go. And just a point, you know, we are that international company. We have research offices all around the world, and ESET actually is known very much for its research. So certainly over the last year, you may have seen research from us coming out specifically to do with the conflict in Ukraine. You know, we work with organizations here in the US like CISOs, so we are a JCDC partner. And we work relentlessly as a research organization to publish our research in order that the actual whole ecosystem is better protected. So if you're interested in reading that research, it's published on welivesecurity.com. So thank you. That's me.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to the panel questions now. First, I'm going to launch our first audience survey, and that audience survey is, does your company have a bug bounty program? All of you should see the poll window up there. You can go ahead and answer. This is a select one. And with that, let's go ahead and we'll go to the first panel question. Karen, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, the Joe Sullivan case illustrated risks and responsibilities that many in our industry did not previously consider as issues before. How much of these are specific to the Uber situation versus being a new part of the CISO landscape? And I'll go first to Matt, and then Garrett, and then Tony. So Matt, kick it off with you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, you're good.
I switched machines and reset the router and did everything. So sorry about that. So I kind of look at this as it's kind of new to the CISO landscape. I think you have a lot of CISOs under a lot of pressure, especially when you get in these larger tech firms that, you know, they're kind of the pinnacle, the top of the top as far as IT firms go, you know, something like Uber that's cutting edge. And they're kind of, you know, there's a lot with their career on the line, things like that, and they're willing to take some kind of risk. There's also things like financial interest, things like that, you know, board of directors, stock prices, all of those kind of things that come into play, puts a lot of pressure on these CISOs to kind of make some decisions that, you know, 10, 15 years ago would have, you know, never even crossed the table, wouldn't be something they'd be willing to do. Now they're willing to try to do that, to kind of move forward, to kind of maybe save their career, get their next job, or, you know, save the company a bunch of money, depending on, you know, stock evaluations and things like that.
Absolutely. I think that's really relevant. Garrett, what do you think?
I love what Matt said. Straight on top. The guys are under pressure to, you know, show the board I'm doing my job. I work internationally and work with different people around the world, and I always say, well, remember, I'm an American. I work under metrics, and we just do. We really do. And it's not always good, right? And I know I see the current regulations all say, hey, we're going to make this a board. We're going to make IT security a board responsibility. Okay, everyone who's been on a board, everyone who's been in these meetings, you know what that means. The security guy gets up there and he's got 10 minutes to go over his world, and he's going to have to quantify the entire enterprise's IT security in 10 minutes of metrics. I just saying we're asking for more Joe Sullivans. That's my start.
Exactly. There's a lot of pressure to present things in the best light, and then yet, you know, you're supposed to give a realistic picture at the same time.
Right.
Tony, what are your thoughts?
Well, firstly, I think this is not a single person that's caused an issue here. I think, you know, if a company has had a cyber incident such as this, then that one person is not the decision maker. This is a group of people in a room that have made the decision. I think there's a fall guy here to a certain degree. So I'm just pointing out that while what they've done is wrong, I think there's a broader set of people that have made that decision. You know, because you'll have had the CEO, you'd have had the CFO, you know, all the different people in the room with all the different reasons why you don't want to disclose a data breach. And they'd have all had their own motivations. And it's those motivations that one person then took the action from the room and put into play. So I'm just saying, I think there's a broader issue here.
I agree.
And I just want to come back to actually something that Garrett just said about boardrooms and stuff like that. You know, I think it's been a huge challenge for CISOs in the boardroom. You know, right up till COVID, the security team was the weirdos, the geeks down the hallway slightly, and the people that typically said no to things. I think that changed. And then I think on top of that, we're seeing change since Colonial Pipeline, the White House executive order last year. I think you're starting to see some change actually in business. So I don't know how many of you have read the SEC cyber incident reporting proposals that were put out last year for discussion. I know they haven't been implemented, but one of the things in there was actually a question for public companies is, what cyber security skill sets do you have on your board? And I think by asking that question, I think it puts cybersecurity clearly in the boardroom, because you'll have somebody in the boardroom that understands what the CISO is actually saying, and
Yes.
they'll have a friend in the room. So I think industry is changing.
Yes, I think those are really relevant points. Thank you.
All right, with that, let's go to the second audience survey. I'll launch it now. And the question is, does your company have an internal process to report data breaches by your company or vendors? And this is a select all that apply. I will give everybody again a couple of minutes to go ahead and answer this. Pick whichever ones make sense for your company. And with that, we'll go to the second panel question. Karen, go ahead.
To what extent do your bug bounty programs operated by third parties reduce liabilities for companies? I mean, we know the answer to a degree from the Uber case, but I think we want to dig a little deeper into it and get some of your thoughts. Garrett, why don't you kick it off?
Well, if you're using them to bribe the hackers, I don't think that reduces your liabilities. Sorry, that's too Chicago an answer, but
I like that.
it's like everything else, and this is what I've been an identity engineer for like 25 years, just programming and building companies and all that. In the last 5 years of my life, I've been working with the compliance people, and they would look at this and they go, well, bug bounties don't matter, user access reviews don't matter, SOX reports don't matter. It's how you handle it, right? And it's if you are upfront and you're using your bug bounties, which are fine, that's a decent idea. It's I like crowdsourcing, I like all that stuff, but and it could be one of your tools to ensure your software is secure, and we identify the gaps. But I mean, everyone on this call probably has some software background, and we all know that software is always flawed. It's always flawed. It's just the nature of the beast, and it's really how we construct our enterprises. And the word of the day is the governance. What's the governance on the controls that we put in place, and how we acted it? And I think that we're in a litigious society on both sides of the Atlantic, and the truth of the matter is that you've got to have your evidence to show that you have a process. And yeah, like Uber got hacked. Okay, fine. I mean, we identify that we got hacked, but here were my controls in place. Here were my operations that I did on it. As Tony accurately said, it's not just a single person, it's the entire enterprise. And I believe that's the bug bounties is one of the mechanisms, plus your QA, plus your own external, is auditors and internal auditors, is your process to show that you have a practice and procedures in place to secure you.
And I get the sense, Garrett, from what you're saying is, the idea is there are always going to be flaws. There
Yes.
are always going to be breaches. You're doing your best to prevent those from happening. But bottom line, at some point, something bad may or may not happen. And your ability to show that you took all these steps to try to prevent that, and that you're transparent about what happened.
Yeah. I mean, you can look at the industry and say that some good examples. I thought that Okta took their swipes pretty well, and they were pretty transparent about what happened and said, okay, I got it, and we're going to be addressing.
Yeah, good point. Tony, what are your thoughts?
Well, firstly, I think we need to separate kind of the Uber case from actual bug bounties and vulnerability disclosure. And the reason I say that is I think that was just an abuse of a bug bounty program in completely the wrong way. So let's dismiss the Uber part of that from the question. But what about does it reduce liability? Well, I'm not sure about that, but it's what I would say is it's very important that companies have the mechanisms in place for somebody to report a vulnerability found, whether that's in their website, whether that's in their software, or whatever it might be. And even if it's an end user company. So what I mean by that, is it somebody that doesn't actually publish software, doesn't have an app, but has a website. Maybe they've got vulnerabilities in other parts of their organization that somebody needs to report. And there are a lot of very talented people out there doing a lot of good, in effect, free Q&A for companies looking for these vulnerabilities. And those, as long as they're being managed responsibly, say the disclosure is done responsibly, and that disclosure then leads into the correct actions within the company, and there's a process in place, like Garrett just said, important to have that process. Somebody reports an issue, that issue is taken seriously, it's fixed, and you're communicating with the reporter on a frequent basis. I think those are the important parts. It's amazing that sometimes when I hear from our own researchers that they found some issue, whether it's on a website, in a product, in a device, and they struggle. They'll spend 2 months actually trying to get communication with the company to report the issue. And some of these issues can be particularly serious. And I actually think bug bounties, to a certain degree, sometimes don't help. Because if you then start talking to CISOs in some companies, what happens is every little nook or twist in a piece of software or in the process of using somebody's website, somebody will claim a bug bounty, and suddenly you've got this inbox that's full of people trying to claim money, as opposed to reporting the vulnerability and just rightly getting on with it. So I think that bug bounties don't always help.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. Matt, what do you have to add to that?
So I'm going to probably take a different road here.
Oh, good.
As a person who's been in incident response and building SOCs and doing that, I kind of put my operational hat on, and I look at different things and different aspects of security programs, and know that within a security program, there's several different teams: threat teams, hunting teams, response teams. Attack surface is somewhere where I would put bug bounties, right? Obviously, it's an external facing code issue 90% of the time that's being exposed. I actually feel that bug bounties actually do have a great place, because back in the day, before bug bounties existed, right, and we were doing things like code verifies and things like that, and making our engineers, when they're building, test their code and stuff, didn't really work. It caught kind of the basic coding issues, but the problem with it was it didn't really help out the security team from a stance that bug bounties do. And I think to the point where bug bounties jump in is, yes, there has to be some validation that when people do find some sort of vulnerability, that it's being vetted correctly. And I think I look at it from a standpoint of using a registered third-party contract company like that does bug bounties professionally, for them to kind of do that piece for you. And then that way it kind of gives the security team, who's already stressed out, already over leveraged, already, kind of weak in the knees from just constant bombardment from whatever it may be. It gives them the opportunity to kind of have some leverage against some of the development teams to kind of go back, kind of fix some of the issues that are brought up, and use these third-party companies as more of a line item, right? Like on a financial spreadsheet, to help them kind of cut down their attack surface. And I think that if you look at like modern security, right, you got to look at your internal surface area and your external surface area. And I think that bug bounties play a big role in helping a security team, especially for larger organizations that do a lot of in-house development and things like that. I think that they have a great place. In the case of the Uber situation, I think that, obviously, as Garrett and Tony said, it was just being used in the wrong light, right? They use the money on that line item to pay someone off versus using it correctly. So that's my stance.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, let's go to our third audience survey, which is, at what point does your company's legal staff, either inside or outside legal counsel, get involved with potential breaches? Please select all applying and I'll launch the survey now. So you should all see it. And with that, let's go to the final panel question before we go into the Q&A.
Okay, well, on this question, we've been kind of zooming through a lot of this, so I want to give everybody time, but maybe what we should do first is So the question is, what are the top 2 to 3 lessons that CISOs and other cybersecurity experts can learn from the Uber case? But also, after each of you give the top 2 to 3, if you want to like dialogue a little further and kind of roundtable some of the stuff that we've talked about today, because we've got a little bit of extra time. But Tony, could you kick that off for us?
Well, I could do this in one sentence, probably. Really, have good ethics and don't break the law. But to flesh that out slightly more, I mean, what can actually be learned from this? I think cyber incident reporting and data breach reporting is becoming a very complex issue. If you look at privacy law, you've got GDPR, you've got CCPA or CPRA as it now is here in California. You've got other privacy laws around the world that take in effect, and then you've got cyber incident reporting liabilities coming in. So the FDIC, SEC have got some proposals. You've got legislation for critical infrastructure here in the US. So you've got all these different things around a cyber incident, whether it's a breach or a malware infection incident that's affecting your business. I think CISOs are going to be very challenged because when an incident now happens, you're going to need a third of the table, crisis team around the table are going to be look at actually legally what they need to be reporting and to who, and to multiple people all at the same time, as opposed to 100% of the people being focused on resolving the issue.
Right.
I think there needs to be harmonization in incident reporting. And I think there needs to be some sort of standard of what that reporting really looks like to ease that problem. Do I think at some stage you're going to end up with legal people in the room? Yeah, absolutely. I can actually see a future if the cyber incident reporting becomes too much of a cumbersome thing. I can actually see security teams having a paralegal on staff.
Well, and it's interesting in the Uber case, Joe Sullivan consulted with legal counsel, and legal counsel ended up, testifying against him ultimately. So that bothered me, as I'm an attorney, and that bothered me. I felt like he consulted a lot of people, and you talk about the ethics of the company. The whole team should be working together to resolve these problems, as you had mentioned in your initial comments. So I think you're getting to an important point, and that is, if there's going to be maybe an overarching process that companies follow, and maybe we're going to get there, rather than all these regulatory random things being thrown at people, maybe there will be more of a overarching process. But anyway, I want to get Matt and Garrett's thoughts as well, and we'll come back to you, Tony, for more insight too. But I'm also being told we have several questions from the audience. So Matt, why don't you go ahead, and then we're going to do Garrett and then audience questions too.
Yeah, so I like what Tony's saying. Having done hundreds of incidents and been in some kind of questionable situations, one of the biggest lessons learned is CYA, right? Document. I've had to do it in incidents where people want to brush things under the rug that are above my chain of command. And, you kind of, in this case, you want to document like the attorneys turned on him.
Yeah.
I would have documented, I would have made them sign off on things. If they didn't, then and I've had to do this. I've, had to regretfully resign because I'm not going to be a part of something that's going to put me and my future in jeopardy. Right.
Yeah.
And it is true, right there. Like we said earlier, there's a lot of things at risk that have nothing to do with the cyber attack, but more so financial risks that the companies are not willing to take. And they just assume let you walk away and take the risk on their own, which is maybe something Mr. Sullivan should have done. But at the same time, right, just CYA is pretty much number one. And number two would be like, set the tone, right? You walk into a job that you're going to be responsible for cyber incidents, and like a CISO job or deputy CISO or SOC manager, set the tone on how you're going to document incidents and how, final decision-making processes will be done with the team. So kind of what Tony was talking about, like having an actual cyber incident response plan that covers the actual aspects of disclosure of the incident, right? Things like using cyber insurance to your advantage too, right? When you have an incident as a CISO, leverage that cyber insurance company out the gate day one to deflect some of the responsibility, right? Whether you pay or not pay, or whether you recover without any injuries, doesn't really matter. It kind of, you can use that cyber insurance to be your third party defender. So that way you can say you did divulge the incident, right? You weren't holding back, you weren't doing any nefarious activities. So just kind of my 2 thoughts.
I thought that's really your points coupled with Tony's really provide a lot of good direction. Garrett, what can you add to that?
I loved Matt's responses because I got a 1, 2, 3 in front of me and they pretty much map to it. My first one is establish practices. I mean, establish your practices and as Matt said, document it. Okay, just establish those practices and follow your actual practices. I got great friends and I mountain bike all the time with our CISOs, and they're the most documented, established practice people has ever met in the world. So that's their nature. But in the second one maps to Matt's as well, which was realistic expectations on both sides.
Right.
On the C side, saying, okay, we are in a world of constant hacks. We're also in a world of constant compliance. This is a everlasting journey. I don't want, and this is my third point, which actually is a bit of an indictment on the security incident world. And man, I'd love to have a beer with you because you said something. You were, in the IT, and then you went into security. I went the same route. I was absolutely astonished from being a programmer who you go into a programmer, you build a product, literally looking at the room saying, I don't know what I don't know. You just that's how programmers talk. It'll take time. It'll take me to understand. I was astonished at the general black hat attitude of the incident response team, taking shots over how they, found this hack or whatever. It's like, good God, you're just reporting the ones that you found. So just what I would say is there has to be a general change in attitude. And I'm sure it is. These are so sobering and the hacks are so constant that we have to make sure we're staffed with people who understand that we're almost fighting a losing battle, and modesty and openness with the rest of the organization is way more important than what you've done in the past life. And then the last one I'll put in there is, I do believe in metrics. I just believe they just have to be better. I think the vendors, such as myself, have to come up with metrics that actually help the organizations. And I don't just mean the Joe Sullivans, but I also mean the MSPs, et cetera. Because again, they're securing a lot of these companies, and we the vendors, this is Garrett, product builder here talking, we have to do a better job of providing relevant information and relevant metrics that can proactively help organizations keep their fingers and thumbs in the dam. That's it.
Right. No, thank you. Let's go to these audience questions, and I know you don't have them in front of you, so you might need a second to think about them or whatever. That's fine. But Tony, I'll start with you again on this particular question. We'll have you go first. Should companies require NDAs to award bug bounties, and maybe what are the pluses and minuses of a company requiring those NDAs in those awards?
Firstly, step back from the actual bug bounty. The person reporting is coming to you with a potential vulnerability, and the NDA is to ensure that vulnerability doesn't enter the public domain and become a 0-day issue. So the NDA is there for a purpose. It's an agreement between the researcher that's found the issue and the company to not disclose it. Or that's the way I would see it. So it's not so much an NDA to keep the person quiet. And typically a lot of companies will allow the person to responsibly disclose after there's been a fix. I mean, we see that an awful lot, that somebody will be, a researcher will be given credit for finding an issue, but once the company has fixed the issue, and that's
hold off.
that's all about responsible disclosure, isn't it?
Right.
So should there be a confidentiality agreement? Yeah, absolutely, because in the security world, we don't want more 0 days entering out into the public domain.
Right. Okay, Matt, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, that's pretty solid. I think for me, I wouldn't want to build my own bug bounty program as a CISO. I would want to, outsource that, just because the management overhead. And like, I don't remember who said it earlier, but one of the panel members said it, like, going through it and sifting through the data to, validate those kind of things, and doing things like NDAs and all that. It's kind of out of the realm of what a CISO should be really involving himself with. I'm a big proponent of the third-party aspect of bug bounties, letting, vendors do that kind of work. Well, and obviously there's not too many vendors out there doing bug bounty work, but there are a few that are really doing a good job. And I think that taking that information and using it, and then also, I hate to say it, right? Like, other companies, bug bounties might actually, if they're leveraging a large pool of vendors that they use, might actually help your company out based off of similarities and coding or whatever it may be. So I like bug bounties. Like I said earlier, I think that using a third-party aspect of them kind of limits the headache from the CISO's office, which typically is understaffed as it is, from managing the influx of, good and bad data. So if you can do that and let them handle the NDAs and all that other good stuff, then, it sounds like a way more appetizing way to do it than internally.
Great. Garrett, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, just logically, I mean, as a programmer, if someone is identifying the hacks and flaws in your systems, yeah, I'd want them under NDA.
Yeah.
That's
Okay,
it.
let's start with Matt on this question number 2. What are the best practices for telling your board of director and your legal staff about breaches? So best practices for telling the board of directors and legal staff about breaches. Matt, you're up.
So I work for a large corporation as the deputy CISO, and my best practice was essentially opening that channel of communications, that when they had their monthly powwows, I would take that opportunity to let them know about, minor scale breaches, small scale breaches, but essentially what it was a status line item that went up every week with their weekly report, basically illuminating the fact of whether we had a breach or an incident and or an event or whatever it is, right? So that we were indoctrinating their mindsets to the constant, triage that the SOC team was doing, right? The constant attack, the constant fight. And then when I would do that, right, it was set up so that they acknowledged that they had received that information, right? So assuming that it went out at the end, I would have I actually had the legal team put in there a little, by, receiving this document or whatever, it said that you acknowledged that this events have occurred, yada, yada, yada. So part of that was something that I had done just so that they couldn't do what happened to Mr. Sullivan, probably, where they all acknowledged it in a room, but he didn't have anything written down saying they acknowledged it.
Good points. That's
So
great.
it was part of my CYA methodology that
I like
they
that.
opened the email, then guess what? They acknowledged that they saw it. So
Right. All right, Garrett, you're up. What do you think?
Yeah, the question specific is my mind drifted on some other thoughts.
No, it's the best practices for telling a board of director and
Oh,
legal
yeah.
staff about breaches. Yeah.
I like what Beth said, and basically the open line of communication, and the panelists that said, listen, if you're a big enough company, having access, if not a staff member who is a paralegal, that you basically should have, a meeting weekly, if not on call, to say these occurred. What are the ramifications of this? As someone just said, I mean, CISOs have real jobs, right? They're not necessarily paralegal on everything in CCPA, CCPR, GDPR. NYCR 500. They're not legal experts in all these. Okay.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't see how any CISO can do their job without having direct communication to counsel today.
Okay, thank you. Tony, what are your thoughts?
Well, so if you, I think there's, and I like what Matt said, but I think there are different levels, aren't there, of an incident. I mean, there's incidents that can wait till your weekly, monthly meeting where you're disclosing, kind of the status of what happened this month, and then there's a serious incident, where data has been breached, and you're being held to ransom or whatever it might be. In that instance, there should be a formulated plan. This should be part of your cyber resilience plan, having a cyber incident, and this should be a tried and tested process. Companies should have run tabletop exercises, and that's not just for the cyber security teams. That should include the communication teams, the CFO, the CEO, et cetera, et cetera. So actually, if there's an incident, who to take this to and how to start that process should have been already documented in a company.
That's a good point. Yeah. I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
No, that was just an at the end. All right.
Yeah, no, I think those are all really valid points, because all of these breaches that we're talking about can range from incidences, for lack of a better word, that Matt's talking about, kind of your minor, all the way to the you better pick up the phone right away kinds of breaches where, your company can't function. You are locked down. You have no access to anything. All right, so we'll go to our last question, and we'll start with Garrett on this one. Given the SolarWinds situation, how involved should CISOs be with the cybersecurity practices of their vendors, especially software vendors?
Yeah, extremely. I mean, that's literally what's whole the defense industries all over that, and new practices and whatever, and anyone under a SOC 2 is under that as well. I mean, we're basically determining the supply chain and determining the practices and the procedures of our suppliers. I can say, having been involved in and being a vendor to enterprises, I am constantly being asked, and we just completed our SOC 2 Type 2 for that purpose, for providing the adequate information and the reliability and the trust to customers. So I think the industry has recognized that that's a problem, and is addressing through things like SOC 2 Type 2, and it needs to do more.
It's becoming more customary, like vendors expect those questions, is what you're kind of
100%.
Yeah.
Anyone in my industry knows that is part and parcel of the process, and the team might say they want to have it, but you don't get the approval until you show that you have your practices and procedures in place and documented, and can sometime even pass some type of pen test or audit.
Yeah. Tony, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, actually, I think I'd echo what Garrett just said. I mean, it's about having the right processes and procedures in place. Let's be clear. No company is 100% certain to be secure, are they? So it's how you deal with it when something actually happens, and understanding that the vendors you're dealing with have those processes and procedures in place and take security seriously. So I echo what Garrett said.
Yeah, thank you. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with it, with both of them. I think that, asking vendors to come forth with documentations that they can, pass certain audits is step one. I think step two is obviously testing it, internally yourself too, and limiting their kind of access and control that those softwares can have, doing a least privilege model, especially on various softwares like a SolarWinds, where it's pretty much everywhere. Trying to have a defense in depth strategy around products like that is also super vital, and something that CISOs need to start taking to heart more. I know a lot of them are, but there's still a lot of companies out there that are struggling with that kind of mindset of, trust but verify kind of a thing, where even though you have a really good software vendor and provider, you still need a defense in depth strategy around, potential weaknesses caused by that. And I think that's where a lot of companies, and it's something that I've always kind of strived for when I was in an operational role, was that we would, test ourselves constantly and do role playing where we'd say, okay, if someone were to gain access to yada yada system, what could they do? How could they move? How could they pivot? I think a lot of modern red teaming contracts you see these CISOs do, it's pretty much just like a port scan. It's not really testing themselves. So I think kind of having that overarching strategy of, yep, we're going to make our vendors comply with these policies and procedures and make sure that they can pass these pieces of audits and they're responsible for their software, but as well as internally, we're going to, have a defense in depth strategy around software. We're going to constantly test it, constantly validate it, constantly monitor it. It is huge.
Great, thank you. And Mike, do you have some closing thought comments?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank our panelists for a great discussion. Matt from IBM, Garrett from UTS, and Tony from ESET. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much to our audience attendees. Again, we'll get out the recording to you guys, a link to that recording in the next day or two, as well as a copy of the slide set. But I think this is really, really good discussion. And I thank everybody for it. And with that, again, thanks, guys, and everybody have a great day. And we'll go and wrap things up.
Thank you.